Welcome to Northlandia, a place to bring your curiosity, because here you'll find curiosities. I'm Wyatt Buckner of the Duluth News Tribune, and I'll be your guide as we discover the unique and fascinating stories here in the Northland. Here we celebrate the region's distinctive people, places, and history. In this episode, we look at a Duluth shoe store owner who posed as skiing royalty as a prank. Let's venture forth into Northlandia. Here to walk us through this 1978 prank is reporter Terry Caddo. Terry, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you for having me.
Now, listeners, I'm going to apologize in advance. My voice is not at what I'd call 100% right now. Terry,
neither is mine.
I feel like you sound a little better than me right now, but
I might be pulling on some reserves to try and make it sound a little bit smoother, a little bit nicer.
Yeah. I just drank some tea, so that's helped. It's better than it was when I first woke up this morning, so that's good.
When you first wake up in the morning, it's like
this is
like a door opening, creaky door noise from your mouth.
Yeah, this reminded me of the first episode of Northlandia where I definitely sound not myself in that episode. If you've been listening, if you go back and listen to that first episode, I don't sound too dissimilar than I do right now. So bring it back full circle here in episode 78.
Fair enough.
So before we get fully into it, as usual, how did you find this story?
So this one came from me doing a different story. I was doing what we call a news obituary on a local business person who had recently died. His name is Paul Vesterstein.
Okay.
He was a really well-known community member, and he was involved in this prank. And so his son brought it up when he was talking to me, and mentioned that you can find all the information about it probably in your D&T archives. You can find all the whole story. And I thought, okay, this is kind of an odd story. I'm gonna go see if that's true. Is this actually a thing? Because it didn't sound like a real thing. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it kind of sounded like something that is a story that maybe a dad makes up to tell his kid or something, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I went and dug in, and I'm like, oh no, this is real. And this got reported on, this is a legit thing that this is almost like a caper kind of a thing. So I found it and thought, okay, this story needs to be told again. And I've been willing to do it.
Mm-hmm. And what specifically was the prank?
Right. So Duluth shoe store owner, as you mentioned in the introduction, George Haddad, posed as a Sheikh. We're not sure how to pronounce it, so we're going to kind of throw it out there in different ways.
As usual, listeners, we apologize for our inconsistent ability to
pronounce
speak
things.
Words correctly and names.
And so he posed as this sheikh, and he went skiing in his traditional garb, and everyone treated him kind of like royalty. They weren't really sure. They thought he was kind of like this royal, important person. And
he was a sheikh from Lebanon, correct?
Yes. Yep, that's where he said he was from. Which he is the George Haddad. His family was from Lebanon. They'd moved to Duluth, and he was born in 1920 something in Duluth. So he wasn't actually from, but his family was. So he was. Anyway, he decided to do this. He was convinced to do this. It wasn't this wasn't purely his idea. There was this skiing promoter who wanted to kind of bring more attention to the race. So he saw a video of George skiing down the slopes in his traditional garb from the year before. So he saw this video and he went, that could get some attention. Mm-hmm. So he put it out there that this Grand Sheikh was coming. And then he convinced George, he's like, hey, can you come and do this? Can you be our Grand Sheikh? And he's like, And then when he found out that it was a fundraiser, the event was also a fundraiser. It was a celebrity pro-amateur ski race that also raised funds for skiers with disabilities. Mm-hmm. So that finally convinced George that okay, it's also a fundraiser for a good cause. I guess I could go ahead and do this.
Mm-hmm. And tell us more about George Haddad himself, the man posing as Lebanon royalty, or not technically royalty per se, but
as a Lebanon well-known or wealthy or important type person. Yeah. So he was like I said, born in Duluth in the 1920s. Actually, if you drive on 4th Street, you can still see a sign for his shoe shop.
Oh, really?
Where it used to be Haddad. So it's kind of across from Uncle Louie's Cafe.
Okay.
Yeah, in that area of 4th Street. And so he had that shoe store there for over 41 years.
Oh, wow.
That was his place. But he was also really well known. I talked to a couple of his children, and I say children, they're full adults who have grandchildren of their own these days, but I talked to a couple of his children, and they mentioned how he was really into skiing. That was really, really important to him. He brought them out a lot of times on the weekends. They'd all go skiing together as a family. And then also he was really well known in the community for ballroom dancing. He and his wife would go out, and everyone kind of knew who they were. And anyway, that's kind of a little bit more of who he was outside of this prank. He was also very well known for hosting students who were like in the international exchange. A lot of students from like the Middle East who would come and stay with his family, and he would be, host for them.
Mm-hmm. And so getting back to the prank, how
Yeah.
were they able to pull this off? Because it sounds like they had help, and there's a lot of moving pieces. It wasn't just show up, hey, I'm the Sheikh, or
No, so they wanted to give him some authenticity. So they had another man who was, and this is how Paul Vesterstein kind of got involved in this too. They had a man from this Continental ski shop pose as his bodyguard. So he had like a water pistol full of water, and that was his gun. And so he was his bodyguard, and he kind of stuck around him and stood around him and made him look official. And then they also had a translator. Now, ironically, George didn't speak very much Arabic, so he mostly just kind of like tried to not say very much. And so then they had this student who was a former UMD student who had graduated and moved to Iowa. They pulled him onto it, George Abdullah, and they pulled him into this, and they got it to be his translator. So he's there translating things for George. But yeah, so yeah, they did that. They showed up at this was at Winter Park in Colorado in 1978, and they drove together, the three of them in George's van. But when they get there, the ski promoter Jake had ordered them a limousine to drive them around to the premiere, because not the premiere,
to the event.
the event, yeah. So it looked like they're arriving in style, and they're bigwigs, and they're really important, and yeah,
It's all about the presentation.
it's all about the air. It's about the act. Yeah. So, like, for example, there was a really close call where a Lebanese doctor who was in the area in Colorado had heard about the Sheikh being in town, and he like broke into George's apartment to be like, "Hey there, you need to come and have dinner with me and my family. You're from Lebanon. We're." And he's saying all of this in Lebanese, and George is there. He doesn't have his translator with him at that moment, and he's like, he can't really say much. In fact, he even says in the story from the time that he was like about to like just break down and just tell him, "Look, I'm not actually a Sheikh. Don't no." But instead, some other people come into the room and be like, "You can't just break in here. This is Then they take him
Like,
away.
who do you
and
think
like,
you are?
yeah.
Like, he's
You
too
can't just-
important.
You can't just talk to the Sheikh like that, Yeah. So that kind of helps, if you look like a Sheikh and you talk like a Sheikh, or don't talk very much, I guess that's, people assume that that's what you are. At least back in 1978.
Yeah.
I do not think you could get away with something like this today.
Yeah, with more easy access to information and Google, and
Yeah.
like I don't know how you could get away with that.
I don't
nowadays.
think so. No, this is definitely a product of its time.
And then how'd the actual event itself go? You mentioned it was a celebrity
Yeah.
event.
So, for example, George ended up skiing with Clint Eastwood and spending some time with him and some other, famous people. I think one of the names I saw thrown out there was Ethel Kennedy and other people like that. And so he was like treated really nicely. People were very like kind to him because they thought he was this very important person. He even like gave away prizes at the end, like they had him involved. There's a whole thing. And then, of course, about 2 or 3 weeks after the event, the DNT is just like, wait a minute. They get this press photo from the AP of this man in this garb, skiing down on the slopes, and they go, wait a minute.
That's George.
Basically, yeah. Some people were like, wait a minute. That's George Adot. Like, we know who that is. And so they ask him about it, and at first he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. They ask him like, well, have you been to Colorado? Have you been skiing? And he's like, yeah, I've been to Colorado and I've gone skiing. Well, how recently? Well, I can't say.
It'd be really funny if he played like an Uno reverse in them. It's like, actually, I've been a secret Sheikh all along.
Right? Yeah.
That's kind of just been living my normal life in Duluth as a humble shoemaker.
And you had no
Shoe
idea.
owner.
No. But yeah, so that's kind of how it went.
And then what was the aftermath of this
Yeah.
done? Like once, D&T was on the case.
Yeah.
And
They
we
kinda
made it known,
solved it.
made it known to the world.
They really did. They kind of did. And then eventually, about a month and a half after the event, finally George sat down with the D&T and was like, okay, yes, it was me. Yes, I did it. Yes, and this is how it kind of went. So he went down and did kind of an exclusive. Apparently the folks at Winter Park at first were not thrilled about this. Nobody really kind of likes to be tricked, you
Right.
know? It didn't hurt anyone. There wasn't any loss. Nobody lost any money from this. it was like
They didn't scam anybody.
no. In fact, it only like got more people interested in it, and therefore they raised more money because they raised like something like $30,000 through the whole event. So I mean, that's pretty good, especially if you look at 1970s money versus today. Yeah.
Yeah.
So nobody lost out. Nobody was really like injured by this. In fact, then about a year passes by, and George got invited back to the same event the next year. As himself this time, they just invited him. They still called him like the Sheikh, but they in quotation marks this time, And
Now a
at first,
new kind of celebrity.
and he kind of was like, I don't know if you want me. And the PR person for Winter Park was like, George, they all love you out here. You have to come. Come on, come back. Everyone's happy. It's okay. We're all settled down. It's okay. And so he actually he did that. There was another event in Idaho he went and did, and he dressed up as the Sheikh. And he even did a couple of local things, like they had a celebrity golf tournament here in Duluth, and so he dressed up for that and was invited as a guest for that. So he kind of got a little bit of notoriety for it, but notoriety.
And how did I believe in your article you included how some of the celebrities reacted as well. Like how did Clint Eastwood and such feel about being made a fool? Like so they're actors, and like
this is what George heard. So I don't think he actually heard this from Clint Eastwood himself, but it was reported that Clint Eastwood had said when he found out that George wasn't actually a thing, that he was a shoe salesman or shoe store owner, from Duluth. He said that this was better than the Sting. That's the thing that everyone, like his daughter and son both said. They're like, yep, we remember him saying it was better than the Sting. So he thought it was, I guess people were kind of impressed. They kind of thought, okay, and it was quite a thing. Sorry. Go ahead.
How did this newfound fame of sorts impact his family or reach them? I should say.
Yeah.
They weren't aware that it was going on.
I actually talked to his son Sam, and he talks about how he kind of got called into the office. He'd recently started working as a equipment operator for St. Louis County, and he got called in, and he's thinking, oh God, what did I do? Why am I in trouble? Because he just started. He's new, right? And they call him into the office, and they smack the paper down on the table, and there's a picture of his dad, dressed as a Sheikh, and they're like, do you know anything about this? And he's like, I mean, that's my dad. I don't know. He had no idea. No, he hadn't heard about it. Nobody had told him about this. So he just, he's finding out in the room as with other people, and apparently they all thought it was funny. They thought it was okay. What are they going to do about So
yeah, I don't know how that would a prank his dad did would impact his
no, it doesn't
his
really
job
affect
of being
you.
an equipment manager for the county.
No, I think it was just kind of fun to maybe scare him a little bit.
Yeah,
you know how people are when they kind of like.
Or maybe they were just kind of gushing a little bit. It's like, ooh, like you're related to a newfound celebrity,
Yeah.
Like we know this person.
That is pretty funny. Yeah.
Yeah. And so how do you feel like this fits into Northlandia? It's definitely unique, and I'd say also unique to its time, which before, I don't think you can get away with it today.
No, I don't think you couldn't get away with it today. I think it fits into Northlandia because it's very much a unique situation. It's not something that people have thought about before, nor it seems like I don't think anyone has pulled this sort of a thing off again. At least not in such a way that it was like innocent. It was very much done to kind of promote the event. It wasn't really done in like a malicious sort of way. Nobody gained anything from this. It was literally just like, we're going to do this thing.
I mean, it brought increased awareness for the event itself, which raised money, for
and then it
cause.
even brought more awareness to it after the fact. Because I mean, after the story broke of like, hey, actually that guy wasn't actually a Sheikh. I'm sure people were like, what? But he's gonna be back next year. I want to meet this guy. So I think that definitely brought some interest into it, and also just George Dodd, man, he was kind of an interesting guy. I was really glad to learn more about him.
I feel like I'm trying to look back through 78 episodes of Northlandia, like how many pranks have been discussed on the show. The only thing I can think of off the top of my head was Honk the Moose, when they joked that Honk was stolen when they were
Oh yes,
just
they got him
they're just doing like
repaired.
repairs for him and stuff, but like they made it a whole thing about how he was stolen.
They made it a whole thing about him being he was stolen, which is kind of funny because like I think
they were raising money for his ransom or something.
Well, and then it was also funny too because it's like, oh, Honk the Moose has been stolen, and they did all the things. Which is funny because I think they stole him in the first place. Anyway.
Yeah.
Because he was supposed to be going someplace else, or is that a different one? That may have been
Ooh.
a different moose. I don't remember. Statue stories
I
all
have to
blend
look
in my
back in that
head.
episode. That might be the right one. That might be the same one. Maybe.
I think it must have been a different one.
Have we talked about other moose statues on this podcast?
There was another one in
Oh,
Moose
you're
Lake.
right. You're right.
I think that might have been, that was the one that was stolen in the first place, technically, because he was supposed to be going to someplace else.
Yeah.
And then the guy was just like, hey, real talk. How much money does it take for this moose to...
Listen, listeners, there's some wild stories on this podcast sometimes, and apparently we get them mixed up every once in a while.
There's so many things. There's so much lore.
Mm-hmm. So much
And it's
lore
real,
in Northlandia.
which I love it.
True weird
Yeah.
stories of the Northland.
Well, and that's just it. Once I heard about this, I was like, well, I can't not do a story on this now. This is too interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it's like a real thing that happened and there's all this information from back in the day. I will say, shout out to newspapers.com for having our archives now, so that way we can go through and look through this stuff, and it's super easy to do. That's really, really a good note.
And you can look at it too, listeners.
Yeah,
Like, it's
you
not
wanna
just
go through.
reporters that have access to it.
I've got links in the story, so if you want to go through and see what it looked like from back in the day, yep, definitely take a look.
Mm-hmm. All right, Terry. Well, I think we'll wrap up there and save our voices a little bit more. But this has been a fun conversation. I really enjoyed this hearing more about this prank and George, and I don't know, it's a good story.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us in this venture into Northlandia. To read the article for this week's column, visit duluthnewstribune.com/topic/Northlandia. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to support us, consider becoming a subscriber to Duluth News Tribune at duluthnewstribune.com/subscribe. Join us again next time and discover the extraordinary stories that you just might miss around the right place at the right time, ready to step off the beaten path with no rush to return, here in Northlandia.